I've been so looking forward to this. Thank you for joining me.
No, thank you. It's lovely to be able to share this platform with you. So.
Yeah. Well, tell me, who is Fatima Whitbread?
That's a very interesting question because it's one that I always start with my keynote speaking. Who is Fatima Whitbread? Abandoned as a baby, some would say left to die in a flat. A neighbour heard a baby cry and hadn't seen anybody coming or going in a couple of days. So she called the police, who banged the door down, rescued the baby, which was myself, and then I was taken into hospital and recovered for 7 months from malnutrition and nappy rash. Pleased to say I got over the nappy rash, John. And during that 7 months, I was then made a ward of court, which saw me incarcerated in the care system for the next 14 years of my life. Now that 14 years was hugely impactful. And trauma is very much a thing that young people, when they live in the care system, suffer from. When they haven't got what they call unconditional love, trauma sets in. So abandonment, neglect, all these issues that happen. Also, I experienced a huge amount of abuse, physical, sexual and emotional abuse. So I would say my emotional needs were rarely met. And having sort of lived in the care system for 14 years, that in itself, set me up in a way to feel, what has life to offer? What is there out there that I can do to get myself out of this dark place? But if I was to track back, and as a youngster, nobody ever sat me down and discussed it with me and explained to me, that there was anybody out there for me. I didn't have any visits or birthday cards or, to indicate there was a family out there. And I can remember playing in the front room, which faced the car park in this children's home. And anybody that came into the car park would always say, is that my mummy coming to collect me? And this is very true of a lot of children that live in the care system. They fear for what might happen to them. They find it very difficult to process things. And of course, they trap themselves in their mind. And in that emotional stress that they go through and the trauma, we know that 27% of 14-year-olds, by the time they're 14-year-olds that live in the care system, suffer with mental health issues, and which is quite a high standard.
Absolutely. There must be a lack of hope as well. For those 14 years, you've got no role models, you've got no love, you've got no emotional support. So where did you get your hope from? What kept you going, if you like?
I don't know. Obviously I do know. Obviously when I moved to my second children's home, which was when I was 5 years old, I was told quite out of the blue, Fatima, be downstairs here, sit in the reception area. Your biological mum's coming to collect you with your social worker to move you to a new children's home where you'll be living with your half-brother and sister. And I kind of thought, well, what's this all about? No, I didn't know I had a mother or half-brothers and sisters. And why am I being moved from the only home that I ever know? This is my family. The children are my family. It was a scary moment. And I think this is the problem in the care system today. It still goes on. Nobody explains anything to these young children. And also, children are often moved up to 30 or 40 times in their lifetime in the care system.
That's massive.
Which is very unstabilising, and actually it sets them up for further failure. It certainly damages them.
It must create huge trust issues as well, right?
Mm-hmm. And also, they're not able to build relationships properly. Their education is damaged in many respects because they're moved from borough to borough, so the curriculum is different. And the stability is what they really need, the love and security of a good family. And that's very hard to find in the care system today. Foster carers do a good job, but they're far and few between. And a lot of them need support as well with regard to trauma, to understanding trauma, because a lot of young people, as I say, suffer with trauma. And that can be misunderstood for behavioural problems. And that follows them around quite a lot. I find that occasionally we hear about some of the problems that our young people have with criminal records. And I think that's all about a lack of education, again, within the system with policing. They understood trauma, they'd understand these young people and would be able to circumnavigate them into the right areas. Instead of giving them a criminal record then which follows them around, it makes it even more difficult for them to get jobs later on.
Because there's prevention there, right? If they're educated. And actually there's the children and the adolescents, and then there's the adults themselves. There's a mismatch, isn't there? There's
absolutely
children that haven't got any support, don't know how to behave.
That's right.
Then they don't conform to societal rules, do something that's wrong, get put in the prison system, or, you know, they didn't know.
Well, prisons, as we know, 30% of under 21-year-olds that are in our prisons today have either come from or crossed the path of the care system. And a lot of the problem today is that we don't have like community-based events. Long gone are those days where they could actually engage with their community in events. It all costs too much money. They're not able to engage and find good role models, skill themselves up, and, you know, eventually find, you know, apprenticeships, you know, jobs where they can, you know, move into and build good social network around them within the area that they live. This is a really tough call, and for a lot of young children, it's significantly challenging in the UK today. And so that's why I myself are calling for fundamental change. And Fatima's UK campaign which is what I'm the founder of. Obviously, through the campaign, we try to engage our children in programs and the power of sport, arts and technology programs. But the fundamental change which I'm calling for is for safer, healthier, happier tomorrows, and enabling to put these young people on a human, unstoppable path to reaching their goals so that they can live their dreams. In doing so, that would help to break that cycle and, you know, enable them to build a proper foundation for their future families too. And future generations beyond ours, you know, if we don't start looking at addressing these issues now and how we can best improve the care system sector, I'd hate to think what society is going to be like, because all these young people, if through working with them from an early age, will help shape who and what they become, and also determines what society ends up.
Absolutely, which goes back to education, right? You know, there's
it's all about education.
And actually, if you know, it's a financial negative, if you like, a number of these children that don't need to be, you know, ultimately in the system at the taxpayer's expense, if you like.
Yeah.
If you could get involved from a preventative point of view, you're benefiting society. You're stopping so much trauma and kind of pain for, you know, like what you've been through, right? you come through from a lived experience, so you have that perspective and maturity to look back, to know what needs to change.
Yeah.
If you could change one thing, there's probably a huge sort of change you're trying to implement, but what's the key thing that's broken that needs to change ASAP?
Well, we've since working on the campaign summit, which is this April, 23rd and 4th of April at the Guildhall, and it's a massive call of arms, solidarity really, to change the history of our care system by bringing collaboration and partnership together, ideally to share good practice and knowledge through the whole spectrum of a young child's life. From the minute they come into the care system, throughout the care system and out and beyond. What we're trying to do is eradicate silos, because we know there is some good stuff out there, but they don't communicate. So the biggest single problem is nobody knows what's out there. So as a charity, we're becoming facilitators to bring together that collaboration and partnership, of which I've used my lived experience and my Olympic platform to engage with and interact with the public, also with banging on doors at ministers' doors and organisations, stakeholders, local authorities, directors of social workers, county lines, probation, homelessness. We've got Lord John Bird who's coming along to our summit to talk about homelessness, because when a young child, and I always say, the corporate parent, which is the government and local authorities, they have a moral duty and responsibility of care to make sure these young people are safe. Now at 18, they say to these young people, here's £2,000, You've got one point of contact only twice, and ta-ra, have a nice life. Now, if you've got families of your own, and I'm assuming you do, just think about that. Would you push your child out at the age of 18 and say, off you go? Because 33% of them, within the first 2 years become homeless. And I always say, what do you want? You want that fence at the top of the cliff or the ambulance at the bottom? We've got to do more to secure their future. It's not sustainable. They don't have, as I say, mental health issues by the time they're 14. They find it very difficult with their academic studies. Only a third of them, compared to their peers, go on to further education. They cannot find work, and particularly if they're homeless, they've not got a roof over their head. That's a virtual impossibility. So what do you do? How do you combat this? And the answer is to bring the collaboration together. Let's thrash this out, and let's make sure that we look to see where it is that we can, set the white paper by harnessing the power of one voice in numbers. We've got 110 collaborators. We've got 760 stakeholders each day on each day of the summit. And by bringing and harnessing together that collaboration, you then get them to sign up to a pledge of eradicating silos, so they work together. And then obviously the white paper also that we put to the government by that collaboration will bring force to bear on the government to make changes, which is, one is to up the age from 18 to 25-year-olds. Very doable in my view, and it should be. Nobody in my friendship group that have got children push their kids out at 18. My son's just left, he's 27, and that's the normal age. The average age is 27 to 30, because even they find it difficult with a bank of mum and dad, nans and granddads, aunts and uncles, to get a foot on the ladder. Now, bearing in mind, most conventional families, when they have their children, they get involved with supporting them through their friendships, through their schooling, through their careers. And these young people, they don't have that. So it's vitally important that collaboration and the pressure to bear on the government will make sure that they take their duty of care much more seriously than they have done in the previous years.
It's such an important mission you're on. I'm just listening to that. There's what you're trying to achieve, and then there's so much that you, as I'm going to call you Fats. I've listened to so many podcasts and programs in
I've been called worse.
And Fats is leading the charge. You're a role model. You are the engine. You're bringing these entities together. You're shouting about the trauma and the experiences that you had that need to change. How important is that kind of role model scenario to you, and particularly in youngsters looking to someone that's come through it and trying to affect change?
Clearly, we need to amplify the children's voices and young people's voices. So no one better than someone that's had lived experience and using my Olympic platform to do that, which makes it a formidable force to confront the government or ministers and say, we need change. Why not? Because at the end of the day, it's very doable. And, there is a lot of good stuff out there, but nobody knows about it. It's an opportunity to also celebrate the tireless work that they do as well on the ground floor level, which is, the paid and unpaid workforce, which often they get the kick in the crutch too. Have done over the years.
But they probably haven't got a lot of support, right? It just feels like there's a huge undertow of not enough support funding, which is, of course, what you're trying to change.
Support and funding. Funding's a key word, because there's a very big squeeze on out there at the moment, and everybody's vying for the same funds, and it's very difficult to get that kind of funding. And I always say there's two types of charities. There's the headliners and there's the frontliners. The headliners are the big charities that scoop up everything and society puts into it. And then there's the frontliners that work on a day-to-day basis, which look after your family within your communities. Now, if those charities struggle to get the funds, they're going to go under. And many of you are seeing that happening now. So who's looking after your loved ones on a day-to-day basis? they're the ones that you should be supporting. And I advocate that if you're going to do fundraising, go to your local communities, support your local charities, because they're the ones that are going to be there from start to finish. The bigger charities, I think they do a wonderful job, but equally they have big overheads. So a lot of the funds that they bring in go on administrative costs, and a lot of it also goes back into fundraising. So there's arguments to and for and against with funding. And I experienced a lot of that myself because I've raised over 230,000 in order to get the summit up and running, which hasn't been easy.
No.
Again, using my platform and using pressure to bear with my lived experience.
Where did there's so much you've achieved, MBE, Sports Personality of the Year, winning world championships. It feels to me like there's always been a journey rather than a destination for you, and that legacy side of things you're building right now.
Absolutely.
But to just survive was probably one key driver for you to then thrive. So I think sport was a key thing for you. I know your story through showing an interest in sport to then seeing a javelin for the first time, to then look where that took you. But also they're giving you that discipline, that focus and purpose, if you like, to follow that. Where does that fit into your world now? And I'm sort of asking that in a retrospective point of view of children finding purpose and hope to be able to pursue something.
Well, I engage with a lot of young children all the time through the campaign, Fatima's campaign. We do the Power of Sports and Arts and Technology programme. So I work and I've engaged and I've got people aboard like Man United Foundation, the football club, England Football League Trust, Essex Cricket County, who I work with my friend Graham Gooch. So that covers the East Anglia to East London, the England Football League Trust up and down the 72 boroughs up and down the country, West Ham Foundation, Safeguarding, which is Joseph Lyons and my friend Jackie Ferdinand. It covers all the London boroughs, Newham and that. So what we try and do is skill up young people and get them into jobs. And the idea is not all of them love sports. So we've got dancing schools, we've got technology programs.
So you've got diverse opportunities for them to find something that they can thrive in.
Absolutely. And so, but how did I mean, back in the 60s, being in the care system, it was, nobody knew about children in the care system then. And children's homes were like 25 in our first children's home, 14 in my second. And it was in my second children's home that I found an auntie called Auntie Ray. Now, she was my bright shining star. And the book that I launched just before Christmas, all proceeds go to the Fatima's campaign to help children in those programs. My bright shining star is based on Auntie Ray, and every borough should have an Auntie Ray, because
your face lights up when you talk about her.
And she was just...
That was your hope, right?
Yeah.
Because you saw such a negative side of humanity, and then...
She was the one that actually made us children feel safe and secure. And I always used to call it a tickle monster. And the reason why I called it a tickle monster is I used to hide under the bed sheets in the mornings, and if I knew she was on duty, I wouldn't get up until she tickled me, because it just made my day feel like it got off on the right foot. So I always say, good job she did, because I'd still be there now, right? So Auntie Ray also taught me some really important lessons that have stayed with me and will do throughout my whole life. And I was about 10, and I picked these daffodils all around the children's homes. And I always used to run up the top of the staircase and I look out the port window, there she lives down there on that end of the road there. So as a 10-year-old, I picked these daffodils and I walked down to Auntie Ray's and I hid them behind my back, knocked on the door, and when she answered it, I said, "Will you be my mummy?" And she said, Fats, we've got to talk about this. She said, "Come round the back." And I thought, I'm in trouble now for picking these daffodils. So Auntie Ray said, "Fat, sit down." She gave me a cup of tea and a biscuit in her kitchen. And she said, "Now listen," she said, "I can't just be your mummy," she said, "because I've got to be mum to all those other children." She said, "But here's the thing," she said, "I'm not always there and you are." She said, "So why don't you be there, mummy, when I'm not there?" And I kind of started to think about this and I thought, oh yeah, I could be there, mummy, And I then started calling out all the injustice, which didn't make me very popular as a 10-year-old in the children's home, but I took it quite seriously, and I started to look after the kids, like if they were having bad night dreams, and I'd wake them up, I'd tell them stories, we'd play trampoline on the beds or pillow fights or drawing matchstick men on the steamed up windows, sort of thing that kids do, right?
You'd become a leader, you'd become someone that wanted to nurture because of the humility and the sort of conversations you had with you, right?
What that taught me, John, was in giving, you receive. So in fulfilling their emotional needs, they gave that love back, and it made me feel nourished. And the other thing what it did is it swiveled the lens. In looking out for them and looking after them, it made me forget about my own victimisation.
Bigger purpose.
And I didn't grow up feeling victimised by my circumstance. I was looking outward all the time to make sure those children were emotionally fulfilled. If there was injustice, calling them out, of which, it led to punishments as well. But hey-ho, at the end of the day, I had that sense of importance about, what was right and wrong.
Yeah, and not to sit and be quiet, which I imagine for years previous you had stayed quiet, you didn't want to get into trouble, you didn't know it was your place to say anything, whereas actually you were empowered, I guess, by that conversation.
And that word empowerment's very important, because the principle is important to me, and the curiosity and values, and my values and beliefs are really important to me in my life. And one of them was curiosity, and I always lean a bit into the why, because the why is you learn, you're experiencing why, and you're asking the right questions. And I think it's always good to have healthy debates. If you don't agree with something or you think it's wrong, why don't you question it? And I've often done that. I did it on I'm a Celeb when I was debating that it was wrong that contraband was brought in, but it was more not about the individuals, it's the principle. And the principle and the message that you're giving to people, if you don't cross-question in the right way, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And that's a lot to do with, my growing up, and that steeliness, the inner strength of wanting to survive, and not just survive, but thrive.
Yeah, which you are.
Yeah, and talking to young people today, which I have to do quite a lot of. Some of them have been, I was sexually abused at knife point by my mother's lover as an 11-year-old, and growing up with that. And sometimes I hear stories with young people in the care system, which I can relate to, and having been able to share that empowers them to release that within them as well. And I can remember 90-year-olds writing letters to me when I became world champion, and then my life story was told. And I had the postman, he bought a big sack of letters, and I went through them all and answered them all. But there were 90-year-olds that were writing to me saying about their experiences and how it's enabled them to release that.
That's
within
powerful.
them.
Yeah. Amazing. It shows it's never too late to actually release that emotion, because so many people live with bottled up emotions.
You don't have to be just in the care system for that to be going on in your life.
Exactly, but lived experiences and storytelling. There's your life is an incredible story. And I think you've also then understood that's a platform, and then you've been able to make sure that the people that have touched you, lit up your life, and also the people that have really been cruel to you. You've actually, I wanted to ask you.
I forgive
That's
them.
what I was going to say. I wanted to ask you, preparing for this chat, whether you'd forgiven your mother, because I know that there's, for me as a dad of 2 daughters, just like almost unforgivable behaviour there. But I can tell you're at peace with it. And I can tell that makes you a stronger version of Fats to be able to then educate and not dwell, and also to be understanding of the fact that who knows what was going on in her head, in her world, and what she'd been through to get to. There's a lot of power in that.
It's a bigger picture to it, because at the end of the day, past trauma and future events can trigger what that does to you when you experience trauma in your life. And I always say it's not unique to just children in the care system. Trauma happens to all of us just by welcoming us as a human being. But it's the responsibility of us when we reach a certain age to do what I call the healing work. And the healing work is what, at the end of the day, will safeguard you in the way you go through your life. And when I talk to a lot of local authorities, social workers, virtual heads of school, young people. I say you've got to understand how to do the healing work so that you can combat anything in the future that's going to trigger you off from what happened in the past.
That comes back to the education.
And it's
so
about
powerful.
education. And you can do this quite easily now. Modern world has it that you can Google anything. I mean, you can do podcasts, listen to podcasts. So somebody who may well listen to this, a handful of people, you may save them from, not being able to rescue themselves, where they can now tune in and they can find an emotional intelligence very easily on a podcast. And I always say the 3 M's: movement, mindfulness, and mindset. And those 3 M's are the most important thing that I do myself each day. So movement, it gets the good serotonins going. Mindset is 90% in anything you do anyway. It's all up here. And mindfulness is something, when you're moving, you're going to see, if you're walking in nature, wonderful peace and tranquility, which gives you a good flow state of mind.
Keeps you present.
It keeps you present.
I was going to ask you, there's so much you're doing. You're so important. you're a national treasure, but what you're actually doing is so important. I was going to ask you, what do you do to look after yourself? Because you've been an Olympian, you've won world championships. So the physical side of things was muscle memory and built in. But as soon as you walked in earlier, I said, you look well, you've got a glint in your eye.
Yeah, I still train.
And so it's that discipline and those 3 M's. It's good to hear. Do you have like a morning routine? I'd love to know what you do as Fats when you wake up and what the sort of priorities are, if you like.
Well, for me, I'm a morning girl. I mean, I fast in the mornings and up until midday. And in the mornings, I normally do a 2-hour workout program. So it'll be cardio work and it'll also be combined with strength work. And when I look back, I have to laugh really, because as an athlete in my era, it was the 80s, and I call them the golden years, because we competed in a period of time where it was a communist rule, behind the Iron Curtain, and also a period of time where no woman was really looked at as having muscles. So I was kind of a trailblazer in many respects, and I had to learn to live through the finger pointing. Oh, she's got muscles, Oh, so what? If I was a model and Bo Derek, that would be different. But Bo Derek can't throw a javelin, and these are the tools for the job, right? So I needed to. But every young girl today goes to the gym, builds up their booties. They're showing off their, on social media.
You were almost a pioneer.
So it's a bit of a pioneer there.
Yeah.
And also, as far as an athlete, women's sport goes, being a world champion, Olympian, equal pay. I went through that as well. So I fought very hard, because it wasn't just for me, it was also for future generations and building a platform for the next lot that came along. Because I was often being told, oh, you're just the girl that walked around with a card in the boxing ring. I think Mr. Ovett said that in the national newspaper. But it's all part of my learning, and that's what's helped me evolve to who I am now. And the true authentic me is being not just the person that sport was my saviour as a kid that kept me out of trouble, that then I found myself seeing Mary Peters as an 11-year-old win the Munich Olympics when I was in the children's home. That could be what I can do to survive and make good of myself. And
again,
then,
role model.
That's a good role model, yeah. But then realising that through sport, that I actually found who the true Fatima Whitbread was, or who I was, my true authentic self, because it was never just about the medals. It was that journey of learning, that experience of what my capabilities were, what my limitations were, how I was going to deal with the world's media, how I was going to deal with the fact of being a big fish in a little tank when I started becoming successful, going out in the public arena.
This is all growth, right?
Yes,
which
it's all
you
growth,
thrive on.
Self-growth.
Yeah.
And self-growth was the most important thing for me coming from the care system, being green behind the ears, not knowing how I'm going to survive, and creating that life for myself as I went along. And then obviously having to face what had been, through the success of my athletic career, being told, because the Sun newspaper went to the biological mum, took a picture of me in a frame and had her take a picture saying, I want my blood daughter back. And then it was told to me, well, you've got to write your life story.
That must have been financially motivated.
For her, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. There's no money in books, obviously, because you know that if anybody's written books. But that brought me to a massive breakdown in trying to prepare for the Olympic Games, because I'd just come off the back of the World Championships. I won Britain its sole gold medal. I was made BBC Sports Personality of the Year. I'd also won the World Athlete of the Year. And it was kind of surreal in as much that this is what I wanted to do, but at the same time it brought me back to where I had been for the last 16 years of my life in the care system. Frightening, a very frightening cine movie going through to realisation. Yeah, it was hard.
Should have been a really happy time because you're being validated and awarded for incredible talent and huge hard work, but then you've got that problem. But of course that triggered you to write your book and put the story out there.
Yeah, I didn't want to write my book. It was told to me to write my book.
Well, I mean, that's why I said triggered,
yeah,
actually.
Triggered,
yeah. The advice was tell your story.
Of course.
How much of that sort of, from being the child left to die to the years of suppression and trauma was almost like being a kind of a sort of a cork in a bottle that's been violently shaken to then...
And that pops a genie.
Yeah, love that. How much of that do you recognise now? Because it feels like Fats would have always been competitive, but you may not have clearly found the journey you went on to achieve all these things, and you've just named some of them, and there's so many more. But do you know what I mean? Do you recognise that? And staying so humble with it, because there's not a Fat sat here with a chip on her shoulder. You're not. It's not. You're not there going, look what I've done.
Yeah.
It's like, so you've been able to come flying out, genie out of the bottle, but then have humility as well.
Well, that's important. There's no ego, and we all have egos, but there's no ego that drives me. What drives me is passion and a need to make fundamental change for these children and young people, because, why shouldn't we aspire for them to have everything that any other child would have in a conventional family?
It's a huge legacy, that. I mean, I want to help you in any way I can with that, and anyone watching and listening can now know what mission you're on. I wanted to end on two kind of relatively quick questions that sort of dive into that. There are so many things you've achieved, and what you're ultimately trying to achieve is so mission-led. What is your greatest achievement?
My greatest achievement is being a mum, and having my proudest moment was when I had my son Ryan, and being able to break that cycle myself through not having been brought up with a mum. To be a good mum and to know that I've completely broken that cycle and been able to live an independent life myself and look back and think, yeah, you've come a long way. And now it's your turn, and this is my ministry through the Fatima's UK campaign to give back and realise my obligation in supporting those children and young people and the care system itself.
Which again makes you so important. And my final question to you would be, how would you define success?
Success is something that if you see somebody that's cracking it now, they would have done months, years of work leading up to that. And you always, what I call when I talk to young people, are working in failure in order to perfect.
To embrace failure.
Yes. So always accept that, that you never just get to the top. You never just wake up one morning and be successful. It's a work in progress. So be the architect of your own life.
It's brilliant advice. I was so looking forward to this conversation, and I've really, really enjoyed it. And I know how busy you are as well, so thank you for making time to talk today.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.